The first thing the trailer makes painfully clear is that Part 2 is no longer about fantasy, but about consequences. Part 1 allowed Benedict to live inside a dream, a single night where titles didn't matter, where masks erased class, and where he could fall in love without thinking about the reality waiting for him outside the ballroom. But the trailer immediately shifts the tone. Benedict is no longer drifting, he is searching. There is a restlessness in him that feels heavier than anything we've seen before. The lady in silver is no longer just a romantic memory, she has become an obsession, and the trailer confirms that this obsession will drive every decision he makes in Part 2. What stood out to me the most is how isolated Benedict feels in these moments. Even surrounded by family, even surrounded by society, he looks alone. And that perfectly matches who he has always been, a man who never quite fit into the role expected of him, now forced to confront feelings he can no longer escape. At the same time, the trailer finally pulls Sophie fully into the spotlight. No longer hidden in the background, no longer just a secret beneath the stairs, she is shown navigating two worlds that were never meant to collide. The trailer confirms that Sophie's story will not be softened or romanticized. Her position, her fear, and her vulnerability are all treated with seriousness, and that alone raises the emotional stakes of this season. Because while Benedict searches for love, Sophie is fighting for survival, and the trailer makes it clear that this imbalance is not going to be easy to overcome. Their moments together feel charged but also restrained, as if both of them are aware that wanting each other is dangerous. This is not a simple love story anymore, it's a collision between privilege and reality. Another major confirmation from the trailer is that Benedict's biggest conflict isn't society, it's himself. We see glimpses of hesitation, moments where he pulls back, moments where it's clear that commitment still terrifies him, and this feels incredibly true to his character. He isn't suddenly transformed into a confident romantic hero. Instead, Part 2 seems determined to force him to choose between continuing to float or finally standing still and taking responsibility for his feelings. The trailer subtly suggests that the truth about Sophie will not just break his heart, but challenge everything he believes about love, freedom, and stability. And that's what makes this season so compelling. Benedict isn't being punished for who he is, he's being asked to grow. What I also loved is how the trailer confirms a darker emotional tone overall. The softness of the masquerade has faded. The lighting, the music, even the pacing feel heavier, more intense. This is a season about secrets being dragged into the open, and the trailer doesn't shy away from that. It promises tension, heartbreak, and moments where love feels impossible. And honestly, that's exactly what this story needs, because a Cinderella romance only works if Midnight truly hurts. Another thing the trailer very clearly confirms is that the class divide between Benedict and Sophie will no longer sit quietly in the background. In Part 1, it was something we as viewers understood, but the characters themselves were still dancing around it. Part 2 removes that safety net entirely. The trailer hints that Sophie's identity is not just a secret waiting to be revealed, but a truth that carries real danger for her. And this is where the story starts to feel genuinely heavy, because for the first time, Benedict's feelings are no longer enough. Love alone doesn't solve the reality of their situation, and the trailer makes sure we understand that. Every shared glance between them feels layered with fear, hesitation, and longing all at once. Sophie isn't just afraid of rejection, she's afraid of losing the little security she has, and that fear is something Benedict has never had to live with. The trailer confirms that this imbalance will create tension between them, not because they don't care for each other, but because they come from worlds that operate by completely different rules. What's especially striking is how the trailer positions Sophie as emotionally strong but socially trapped. She is not portrayed as helpless or naive. Instead, she feels guarded, careful, and painfully aware of the limits placed on her. The trailer confirms that Sophie understands the cost of being seen far better than Benedict ever has. While he is chasing the idea of love, she is calculating risk, and that contrast makes their relationship far more complex than a typical fairy tale romance. You can almost feel the moment coming where Benedict realizes that wanting Sophie means asking her to step into danger, and that realization alone could change him forever. The trailer doesn't give us the full reveal yet, but it strongly suggests that when Benedict finally learns the truth, it won't be romantic or dramatic in the way he expects. It will be devastating, quiet, and deeply uncomfortable. At the same time, the trailer confirms that society itself will play a much more aggressive role in Part 2. The ton is no longer just gossiping in the background. Judgment feels closer, sharper, and more invasive. We see hints of scrutiny, whispers, and looks that linger a little too long. And this matters because Benedict has always resisted society by avoiding it, not by challenging it. Part 2 seems to force him into a position where avoidance is no longer an option. Loving Sophie means defying the very system that gives him his privilege, and the trailer confirms that this conflict will not be resolved easily or neatly. There is a sense that every step forward will come with consequences, not just for Benedict, but for Sophie most of all. The trailer also subtly confirms that Sophie will not be waiting to be rescued. There is an emotional distance in some of her scenes that suggests she is preparing herself for disappointment. She doesn't fully trust the world Benedict comes from, and honestly, she has every reason not to. This makes their romance feel fragile in the most realistic way. Not fragile because it lacks passion, but because it exists in a space where it is not meant to survive. And that's what makes it so compelling to watch. The trailer promises that Part 2 will ask uncomfortable questions about power, choice, and sacrifice without turning Sophie into a symbol or a lesson. She remains a person first, with her own fears and boundaries. What really stayed with me, though, is how the trailer confirms that Benedict's growth will be tested through loss, not reward. There is no sense that love will come easily to him once the truth is revealed. Instead, it feels like he will have to sit with regret, confusion, and guilt before he earns any kind of happiness. And that feels earned, because Benedict's journey was never about rushing towards marriage or stability. It was always about learning when to stop running. Part 2 doesn't promise a perfect ending. It promises a painful, honest one, and somehow that makes the romance feel even more real. The trailer also quietly confirms that Part 2 will push Benedict into an emotional territory we have never fully seen from him before, and that is vulnerability without escape. In previous seasons, whenever things became too intense, Benedict had the privilege of walking away. He could retreat into his art, his curiosity, or simply into distance. But the trailer makes it very clear that this time, distance will not save him. There are several moments where Benedict looks confronted rather than conflicted, as if the weight of his choices is finally catching up to him, and this feels incredibly important for his arc, because for someone who has spent years resisting labels, expectations, and permanence, being forced to sit with uncomfortable emotions is the most radical form of growth. Part 2 doesn't frame this as punishment, it frames it as inevitability. You can't float forever when someone else's life is affected by where you land. What's fascinating is how the trailer suggests that Benedict's search for the Lady in Silver was never really about her mask, but about what she represented. She was freedom without consequence. She was connection without obligation. And now that he is facing Sophie without illusion, the trailer confirms that he must learn to love a real person, not an idea. This is where the story becomes far more intimate than dramatic, because loving Sophie means acknowledging her reality, her fear, and her limitations, not trying to rewrite them into something easier to accept. The trailer shows us moments where Benedict seems to hesitate, not because he doesn't care, but because caring suddenly feels heavy, and that weight is new for him. It's uncomfortable, it's destabilizing, and it's exactly what he needs. Another important confirmation from the trailer is that Part 2 will explore how love can exist alongside inequality without pretending that inequality disappears. We see Sophie moving through spaces where she does not belong, and Benedict realizing, perhaps for the first time, how effortless belonging has always been for him. This awareness doesn't instantly turn him into a hero. Instead, it unsettles him. And I love that choice, because growth that comes too easily never feels real. The trailer hints that Benedict will make mistakes. He will say the wrong things, he will assume he knows what's best, and Sophie will push back. That tension feels honest, and it elevates their relationship beyond fantasy, into something emotionally grounded. The trailer also confirms that silence will be just as powerful as dialogue in Part 2. There are moments where nothing is said, but everything is felt. Glances linger, hands almost touch, and you can sense how much is being held back. This restraint feels intentional. It reflects how both characters are guarding themselves for different reasons. Sophie guards herself because she has learned that hope is dangerous. Benedict guards himself because commitment feels like losing control, and watching these two forms of self-protection clash is where the real drama lives. The trailer doesn't promise grand declarations right away. It promises tension, hesitation, and emotional buildup. And honestly, that makes every eventual confession feel like it will be earned. What also stands out is how the trailer confirms that Benedict's family will no longer be a comfortable background presence. Even when they are not directly involved, their world surrounds him. Expectations linger, reputation matters. And while Benedict has always existed slightly outside those pressures, loving Sophie pulls him straight into them. The trailer suggests that there will be moments where he must choose whether to remain quietly different or openly defiant, and that choice feels terrifying in a way Benedict has never experienced before. Because this time, rebellion isn't about self-expression, it's about protecting someone else. By the end of the trailer, it becomes clear that Part 2 is less about whether Benedict and Sophie love each other, and more about whether love is enough to change the way they live. And that question hangs over every scene. The story no longer feels playful or light. It feels intimate, tense, and deeply personal. Part 2 doesn't promise easy romance, it promises emotional honesty. And if the season follows through on what the trailer confirms, Benedict's journey might end up being the most emotionally mature love story Bridgerton has told so far. What the trailer also strongly confirms is that Part 2 will test the limits of patience, not just for Benedict and Sophie, but for the audience as well, and in the best possible way. This is not a story that rushes toward resolution. Instead, it seems deeply interested in sitting with discomfort. The trailer shows moments where things almost fall into place, only to pull back at the last second, and that constant almost is what creates so much tension. Benedict and Sophie are never fully aligned in the trailer. When one reaches forward, the other